Reem Ibrahim is back with us, Communications Manager at the Institute of Economic Affairs. Reem, good afternoon to you.
Hello, good afternoon. How are you?
Good as gold at this, and nice to have you with us. Let's go straight into that big story then, of course. I mean, absolutely huge at the weekend as the Middle East war continues. The US Embassy in Qatar has told American citizens in the country to shelter in place until further notice. This is obviously very, very high stakes stuff, even if the American onslaught was successful. Let's have a listen, though, to our own Prime Minister, Keir Starmer, speaking on the situation yesterday.
Well, we've long had concerns about the Iranian nuclear programme and been very clear that Iran cannot have a nuclear weapon. The US has now taken action to alleviate that threat. It is important that we now de-escalate the situation, stabilise the region, and get the parties back around the table to negotiate. And I've been speaking with international leaders this morning to that end. So I want to reassure the British public that we're doing everything we can to stabilise the situation, to de-escalate the situation, and to get to a negotiated outcome. But I'm very clear in my own mind that Iran cannot be allowed to have a nuclear weapon. That is the greatest threat to stability in the region.
But kind of stopping short, Reem, to saying I support the action of America. Obviously, it was nothing to do with us. Mr. Starmer, we understand, did get notice that it was going to happen.
Yes, I mean, it's absolutely awful, and it really does signal some of the significant tensions globally that we're seeing over the last few years. And now this has really broken out. I mean, this is significant. This is the first time we're seeing active warfare with the Iranian state. I mean, we're even seeing reports literally in the last 10 minutes of Iran and Israel announcing different government and military strikes to one another. Tehran has been in receipt of some of that as well as Israel. So it's really interesting. We're seeing a lot of it unfold literally in the last few minutes. Some of that tension really being seen as well. I mean, it's awful. I think from our perspective in the UK, we want to ensure that we are supporting our American allies, that we are being seen as people, organizations and governments that are supporting pro-Western perspectives. And the Iranian state are not our friends, and they fund terrorist organizations across the world. I wouldn't be surprised if the terror threat in the West actually increases as a result of what's going on at the moment. But it's absolutely something to be concerned by and something we should be monitoring on an ongoing basis.
Do you sense, I mean, it's a tricky question when we ask the question, has Donald Trump made the world a safer place? I mean, on balance, if Iran now has no nuclear capability, they were sort of in the process of taking this forward, then on that basis, yes, it is safer. But of course, Iran talk about a huge response to this. In fact, their words were that they were going to expand the scope of legitimate targets. So yeah, that would mean maybe isolated individual terror attacks, but certainly as a country, their capability has been somewhat compromised.
Their capability has been compromised, but I don't think we should underestimate what they're capable of. Yeah. And also their existing links. I mean, as I said, they do fund organizations across the world, whether it be Hamas, Hezbollah, the Houthis over in Yemen, probably various different organizations that are based in the West. We have no idea. This is very scary, and there is a lot to happen here. But I think that the question of whether or not Trump did the right thing is an interesting one, because he's, up until this point, taken a particularly non-interventionist perspective. He has said that, we shouldn't be intervening in Ukraine. He has said that the government shouldn't be sending taxpayer dollars across the world. We shouldn't be intervening in conflicts that don't concern the US. And yet this situation is particularly different. The conflict between Iran and Israel, I think, in so many ways can be seen as a proxy war for the West versus the Far East, and these particular governments that are authoritarian, that are they behave in pretty horrendous ways. The Iranian regime, whether it be the Iranian regime or the Russian regime, they all behave in particularly awful ways and break international law on a daily basis. So I think definitely from that perspective, it's right for us to defend ourselves. I just hope that the British government, and from the UK perspective, we are actually sort of taking a forefront on this. And I know Zelensky is coming to the UK today, so I think it'll be interesting with the balance from that perspective. What I think I would like to see is the UK government supporting the US and really showing that that special relationship is alive and that we support them in their actions in order to protect the West.
Which is, I mean, all well said from your point of view there, and I would concur with all of that. But there are people who live among us, Reem, that don't think that way. And you saw that at the weekend with the kind of anti-Israel protests. And then you've got this other pack of clowns turning up called Palestinian Action, who love a bit of vandalism on military territory, planes and stuff like that. Holding banners at the weekend, you know, the Ayatollah is the way forward, you know. I mean, who are these people, for God's sake? And then Palestinian Action, this other group, they were the ones that got into Bryce Norton last week, could be labelled a terror group.
Yeah, I think it's interesting. I mean, I've got to say, I was really shocked by what happened at Bryce Norton. I've actually flown from Bryce Norton before when I went to the Falkland Islands earlier this year. So I've been to the base and I know that it's like relatively quite secure. So I was quite surprised by the fact that these protesters were able to get in there. But of course, you know, it's a base. It's just sort of about an hour out of Oxford. It's a lot of effort, a lot of energy to get there. So it's interesting that they decided to do that. I've got to say though, as somebody that does believe in freedom of expression, I don't believe that attacking and destroying property is part of that. But the government's plans to effectively prescribe Palestine Action and put them in the same groups as organisations like Al Qaeda, I think that that's probably a step too far and probably desensitizes people from the realities of what those actual terrorist organizations are doing. I mean, Palestine Action aren't murdering people on a day-to-day basis, which is what a lot of those organizations
do you know, I had exactly the same. I drew exactly the same conclusion as that, you know, as somebody who's very pro-free speech and liberal values, etc. I don't want a government to be authoritarian enough to simply just willy-nilly prescribe somebody as a terror group because we don't like what they did. Now, what they did was dangerous and it was stupid and we should keep our eye on it. But giving the government that amount of power to simply do that is not a precedent that I want to set. I did think you could have another category just called morons. I mean, maybe that would do it. So they could have, and then every time you turned on the news, they would have to be, because that would be the name of the category. So the newsroom would have to actually make that point and say, Palestinian Action, part of the moron list. And that would make great reading and that would maybe somehow dilute any credibility they thought they had.
Perhaps, or maybe you should be the one that decides what groups are moronic and what groups aren't.
I think so,
quite
yes.
That job, Ian.
I've got a big old list of morons, I have to say. You know, it's growing,
yes,
growing almost, growing almost by the day.
Reference them.
Yeah, absolutely right. Stay with us, Reem. Loads more still to come. Reem Ibrahim is with us, Communications Manager at the Institute of Economic Affairs.